from the global resources of ABC News with Terry Moran in Washington, Martin Bashir and Cynthia McFadden in New York City. This is Nightline, July 16, 2007.
Good evening, I'm Cynthia McFadden. Tonight, the summer heats up in Washington. Larry Flynt, the publisher of Hustler, has once again turned his hardcore pornographic magazine into a perhaps unlikely home for investigative journalism. It was back in April that ABC's chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross broke the story of the D.C. madam. Her phone records led to the resignation of a high-ranking member of the State Department. But now, Larry Flynt has a senator in his sights. ABC's senior national correspondent, Jake Tapper, reports.
It all started with the notorious Larry Flynt, a hardcore pornographer, proud Democrat, and First Amendment activist. Flynt took out this full-page $106,000 ad in the Washington Post last month where he offered a $1 million bounty for dirt to anyone who could document, quote, a sexual encounter with a high-ranking government official or member of Congress.
I got all the money I need, and that's what levels the playing field between the big media and between myself as the checkbook journalism, you know, and I see nothing wrong with it because what makes a story bad if you pay for it? You know, I mean, if it checks out and it's good, there's nothing wrong with it.
This story seemed to check out. An investigator paid by Flynt found digits belonging to a U.S. senator, a conservative Republican, in the stack of phone numbers from 2001 of the so-called D.C. madam, Deborah Jean Palfrey, currently being prosecuted for allegedly running a prostitution ring. A Hustler staffer then called the senator.
Nobody would take the call.
The press release was preemptively issued by this man, Republican Senator David Vitter of Louisiana, who called a press conference this evening, right before the evening news.
I want to again offer my deep, sincere apologies to all those I have let down and disappointed with these actions from my past. I am completely responsible, and I'm so very, very sorry.
Flynt watched Vitter's televised mea culpa today from his Los Angeles headquarters.
Wendy and I dealt with this personally several years ago. I confronted it in confession and marriage counseling. I believe I received forgiveness from God. I know I did from Wendy, and we put it behind us.
You know, to forgive is not always the easy choice, but it was and is the right choice for me.
What made it particularly enjoyable for Flynt is the fact that Vitter is a self-proclaimed defender of family values, who's been a leader of the charge against same-sex marriage.
Worth repeating. Marriage is truly the most fundamental social institution in human history.
He established his credentials as the ultimate hypocrite. Well, what was so saddening about it? He had to do it standing behind his family. So he used his family to try to make it go lightly, the fact, you know, that he was a hooker. You know, I don't care who anybody sleeps with. I don't want people legislating policy for me in Washington, especially morality.
Flynt has been paying for stories like these for years, perhaps most famously during the impeachment of President Clinton.
I will not stand for Speaker of the House on January 6th.
Then Congressman Bob Livingston, another Louisiana Republican, was about to become Speaker of the House when he suddenly resigned. That came after Flynt's investigator called Livingston with questions about an alleged extramarital affair. The winner of the special election to replace Livingston was a young state representative named David Vitter. Wendy Vitter sounded quite forgiving today.
Last week, some people very sympathetically said to me, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now. I stand before you to tell you very proudly, I am proud to be Wendy Vitter.
But at the time of the Livingston and Clinton scandals, Wendy Vitter sounded, well, different. Asked by a newspaper interviewer whether she could forgive her husband as Hillary Clinton and Bob Livingston's wife had done if her husband so strayed, Wendy Vitter said, quote, I'm a lot more like Lorena Bobbitt than Hillary. If he does something like that, I'm walking away with one thing, and it's not alimony. Trust me. 8 years after his scandal, in an interview with CBS affiliate WWL-TV, Livingston said he had talked to Vitter and urged him to stick it out.
Importantly, he has to get back in the fray. He's not been seen much in the last week, and he needs to actually be visible. He needs to pick up his job where he left off, keep his chin up, and know that the sun's going to rise tomorrow.
Vitter this evening was apologetic, but also defiant, denouncing stories from New Orleans media about at least one other lady of the evening who claimed a working relationship with the senator.
Unfortunately, my admission has encouraged some long-time political enemies and those hoping to profit from the situation to spread falsehoods too, like those New Orleans stories in recent reporting. Those stories are not true.
During a previous Vitter run for office years ago, 2 Louisiana Republicans first charged that Vitter was consorting with a prostitute. One worked for an opponent of Vitter's. The other was Christopher Tidmore, who at the time wrote for the Louisiana Weekly. Tidmore says he interviewed a woman who called herself Wendy Cortez and found her credible.
She wanted no money to tell her story, but that she had a long-term affair with David Vitter. And at the very end of it, she basically thought that David Vitter was being hypocritical, and that's why she came forward.
Vitter denies that story, but this evening said his apology is where his comments on this subject would end.
I'm not going to answer endless questions about it all over again and again and again.
For the most part, Vitter's tribulations have been met with support from his colleagues. After all, as Jesus said, "He who is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone." Vitter should not expect the mastermind and financier of his current woes to be inspired by that famously forgiving passage from the book of John. After all, Flint says Vitter has made a career of casting stones.
Anybody that takes a public position contrary to the way they live their private life, they're fair game.
Flint says there's more to come. This is Jake Tapper for Nightline in Washington.